Welcome back to Fintech Compliance Chronicles podcast. I am here with Sanjeev Menon. Welcome, Sanjeev. We're really happy and excited to have you join us on this edition of the podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. Why don't we just cut to the introduction here? Who
Sure.
are you and what do you do?
My name is Sanjeev Menon. I work for a company called Madison Davis, which is an executive and contingent staffing company based in New York. I have been recruiting since 2008, so I'm going into my 18th year. My focus has been and still is recruiting in the AML, compliance, financial crimes, and risk, legal space, anything under that regulatory and legal umbrella within financial services. We do a little work outside of financial services, but if it includes payments of some sort, right? There's a platform that connects a buyer and a seller, we could work with them. But it's mostly financial services. Over the last 10 plus years, my book of business, my clientele has become more and more fintech oriented. It was a happy accident at first, and then I realized how much I love the space. Maybe saying the future is a little too cliche, but it's still the future of banking and financial services. I've become much more heavily involved in the fintech space in general, not just the financial crime space. We were talking earlier about me going to ACAMS next week, but we met at Fintech Meetup, which is for everybody in the fintech space.
You mentioned ACAMS. So what other orgs are you affiliated with? You mentioned them, but I'd love to get an overview of some of the groups and organizations that you partner with, affiliated with, participate in, forums, etc.
So I have been going to ACAMS conferences since about 2011. That's where I started to really enjoy conferences and meeting people and networking, because that is just half the battle for my business, but just half the battle when it comes to the job search. We'll get to that. And then around 2016, 2017, I've always loved to write, and I think we're always trying to add an extra dimension to our jobs to make us enjoy it more, to make it more exciting, more interesting. And I was like, hey, I bumped into the editor of ACAMS today at one of the ACAMS conferences, and her name's Kala, fantastic person. And I was like, hey, I would love to write for the organization. She was like, that's great, get in line. She was nice about it, but she was like, hey, yeah, proof's in the pudding. Send me 5 ideas. And I sent her 5 topics. And then I wrote about 2 of them, and she was like, you're in. And I think the first article that I wrote was about networking. And the second one was about transitioning from being an AML and compliance officer in the TradFi space to the fintech space. That was a topic that was very relevant for me at the time, and it still is. That led to me becoming the career guidance columnist at ACAMS, and then also part of the editorial committee at ACAMS today. I'm getting much more involved in not just the AML conferences, but fintech conferences in general. Other organizations at the moment. I just recently became a Forbes contributor for their leadership vertical. So I've been writing a lot about AML trends in the second Trump administration. I'll be contributing a lot of content to them as well, just about the recruitment space, leadership in general, career development, the job market.
Great. And for the uninitiated who might be listening to this, ACAMS is Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, of which I'm also a proud member. So it's great to see you contributing to the community and boosting the profession. Speaking of trends, I'll highlight for the listeners, we did a poll prior to Sanjeev joining the show, which talked about getting an insight from our readers, from our subscribers, to the Fintech Compliance Chronicles newsletter about questions that they might have for Sanjeev. So one of the biggest questions from the audience was around specifically roles. So let's talk about that. What are the most in-demand compliance roles you're seeing in fintech right now? Or maybe just put more generally, what are, from your perspective, the biggest current trends in fintech and banking compliance hiring?
My favorite question and my least favorite question, for the same reason. I've always considered myself, or at least I've gotten good at figuring out or reading the tea leaves, right, with every new administration. I don't think people realize this, or it makes people feel uncomfortable, but the compliance and regulatory space in the U.S. is very heavily tied to who's in the White House. It's just fact. So I started doing this at the end of Bush second term, and things changed with Obama for 2 terms, and Trump, and then Biden, now back to Trump. So I've been a recruiter over the course of different liberal and conservative White Houses. Well, the reason why I'm saying that is because this is the first time in my career that I'm almost apprehensive to say what the trends are. Because it seems like the rules are changing every day. And at 1 minute, AML and financial crimes prevention is apolitical. And then next thing you know, the current president's commuting the sentences of convicted money launderers, right? And I'm like, okay, so that's an interesting tone to set. CTA is put to the wayside, the domestic registration registrar is put to the wayside, and FCPA is being put to the wayside, the CFPB, that exists next week, we don't know. But I think about this every day, right, for the sake of my business. Banks understand that even though they might not need to enforce something right now or are confused about enforcing something right now, presidents come and go. So you can't roll something back and then expect you not to be punished for it, let's say in 4 years, if the White House goes a different way. Banks right now, they're rolling things back just because, we don't have to stay compliant. But in the TradFi space, what I'm seeing is a pause to figure out the next couple of years until the midterms come along. So it's hard to give specific trends based on what I'm seeing in the market. But what I've come to realize is that there's compliance, there's AML, and then there are existential risks. And if financial services firms are not exactly sure what their long-term strategy is going to be from a hiring perspective, what I do know is that they're all going to try to prevent fraud, because frauds are skyrocketed, it already has, both internally and customer fraud. And the other area is cyber. And we both know that 10, 15 years ago, there was a distinct line between cybersecurity and preventing money laundering and fraud and even compliance technology. Those lines are all blurred now, right? Like, I am a legal and compliance recruiter. I work more now with my tech recruiting practice area than I've ever had in the last 2 decades of my career. So even if there's going to be ups and downs in regards to the demand out there, whether it's going to be AML or OFAC, what I do know is that fraud is going to be in demand for the next 4 years. Cyber is going to be in demand for the next 4 years because everyone's going to be worrying about the bottom line and everyone's going to be worrying about reputational risk. On top of that, the next 2 to 4 years is going to be a renaissance for the crypto and the fintech space. I'm already starting to see foreign fintechs come into the US because they see a market that's going to be more open to them with less regulation and hoops to jump through. This is a very pro-crypto White House, right? So even though it's focused towards deregulation, every crypto company or any new company and any company that's in Series A or it's Coinbase or Gemini, they're still going to increase their staff because of the increase in volume. Fraud's up, cyber's up, and compliance and AML recruiting in the fintech/crypto space is up.
We're talking about trends, maybe just more immediate trends in the last couple months. As I've highlighted in our newsletter, layoffs at regulatory bodies are becoming a very big thing now. And that doesn't exclude the financial services regulatory space. We had the CFPB, we had the FDIC as well, we've had the SEC. I believe some of the other bodies have also made or are going to make cuts.
That you have the OCC examination departments being cut.
Yes. To me, the big thing that comes out of this is that we have a bunch of folks with regulatory experience who are now essentially on or going to be on the job market. So how, from your perspective, have you seen a lot of that volume start to hit your portfolio, your Rolodex of folks who are ex-regulator, ex-CFPB, ex-FDIC, etc.? We won't necessarily say maybe that's a trend, but it's a current event. So how is your approach changing just given this influx of regulatory talent coming into the pool? And if I'm not a regulator, I don't have a regulatory background, but I'm in the job market, what do I need to do to stay competitive with folks who clearly, from one perspective, could be looked at as, hey, this person has an edge? Because if I'm trying to get ahead on compliance, somebody like this can tell me, how do I stay out of trouble? You know, because you're on the inside, so come on down, right? So talk a little bit about this phenomenon.
It's a great question. I've been in the weeds when it's come to this particular phenomenon. It's a good word for it. Since February, Doge went on a tear. So one of the next articles that I'm going to be writing for Forbes is about something called psychological safety, which is an idea that I think I've always understood, intellectually, right? But I never heard the term before. And it's a new passion of mine. Since February, I've spoken to OCC examiners, SEC attorneys and these super qualified heavy hitters that I would have never spoken to unless they had been let go because they weren't putting themselves out on LinkedIn. They're the folks that are recruited heavily. So they came to me because one day they showed up to the office and their security badge didn't work. I mean, it's a pretty terrible thing, but I got in contact with them, and people that I wished I met 10 years ago, I'm finally meeting now. So it started off as, okay, these are super qualified folks, and I think I can get them jobs pretty quickly, considering they're coming from a regulator and their backgrounds are insanely good. And then the layoffs kept on coming, and you're absolutely right. When you have 20 OCC national bank examiners enter the market, it doesn't sound like a lot. That's a lot, though. At the same time, they're all competing against each other for the same jobs, usually in the DMV, the DC metro area, Virginia, Maryland, or New York, and they're competing for the same jobs. And you know what happens? One of them's going to get the job because they're all qualified, but salaries are going down. So there's salary compression. But this is why psychological safety has become really, really interesting, important, and a passion of mine. It's because those people that have been let go, at least they know what their fate is, and now they're only focused on the job search. It could be difficult for some, a little bit easier for others, but at least we know, hey, their focus is to get a job. The other half, the people that still have jobs, more of those people are calling me saying, I don't know if my security badge is going to work tomorrow. And they're like, get me out of here. Which in and of itself, even though they're employed, they're metaphorically flooding the job market, which causes cherry picking, right? Which causes salaries to go down, especially in particular regions like DMV and New York City. And it's just not good for the market. I want to be very clear. This is a disclaimer. I am very, very honest and transparent. So what I'm about to say is going to have a negative tone. It's not pessimism, though. But if you let go of national OCC examiners, CFPB examiners, they're regulatory focused. And let's be very clear, this administration is not big on regulatory compliance. I'm trying to be as apolitical as possible because I think objective facts. It's going to be a little tough for regulatory compliance folks right now. Right? Because the rules are changing every day. There's a 10-to-1 rule, right? For every new regulation that an agency comes out with, the White House is expecting 10 to go out the window. Right? The CFPB is under attack. Some really good people are being let go. The examination departments are being combined. Right? Regulatory compliance is not going to go out the window. There's 5-year statute of limitations. Banks aren't going to be like, we don't have to worry about things because in 5 years, you're still going to be on the hook for that when an audit comes around. Right? But at this moment in time, there's so much uncertainty. The regulatory compliance recruiting space is going to be perfectly fine, let's say the second half of the year. But right now, everyone's just like, okay, what's going to change tomorrow? Or when are things going to stop changing? Right? That's what I've witnessed as a recruiter speaking to these folks. That's a phenomenon that just triggered me into writing about it. I think that article's going to go out next week. But psychological safety is huge. The gist of the article is, I think we all presume or believe that the White House is trying to run the government like a business, right? Efficiency, as least burdensome as possible. All noble. I don't think anyone wants overregulation or 20 hoops to jump through. It's bad for the consumer, right? Everything becomes more expensive that way. So I'm all about it. But it has to be done the right way, right? In a more surgical way. I'm hoping that we get to that point, like all the mess that's going on right now is just part of the experiment. It's all about iterations until you get to success. But you can only have really good performers and have success as a business if you give your employees the psychological safety that they know that if they take a risk, their job's not on the line. We want the people that are actually doing their job that are still there to do it really well. I'll get off my soapbox there, but I think it's a huge thing right now. Yeah. It's a huge thing to me.
Yeah. And you talk about tomorrow. One of the other questions from our community was around automation and AI in the recruitment process, specifically for compliance. So if you can, demystify that for us a little bit. What are you seeing internally in your own experience, but also in the market, on how AI and automation has transformed or is transforming the recruitment and job search and career development process for people who are trying to advance their careers, trying to look for new opportunities, etc.? Because clearly something has changed. Things are continuing to change. Would love to get some tangible thoughts from yourself as a recruiter in the space.
First of all, let me start by saying I am super pro AI. I think AI is going to be a boon to the recruitment space. It already is in many industries. I think it's still at the very, very early stages when it comes to recruiting, which is what I do, and the job search, which I consider two distinct things. It's still very early because AI right now is more of a placeholder term for what it actually is, which is right now it's just automation, right? So I think AI actually has had very little effect on the job search and the recruiting space, but that's going to change very quickly, all right? So by saying I'm very pro AI, I want to engage AI at my company. To me, it's all about efficiency, having more time to do the more human things. AI at first, in my opinion, is going to be, I don't know if you ever watched the show Westworld on HBO, but there's this scene where Aaron Paul in one of the final seasons is trying to get a job. And if I remember correctly, no one knows that he's actually talking to a chatbot until like much farther into the episode, which was discouraging, but that's what it's going to be like going forward, right? AI is going to be the initial screener of candidates, not just their resumes, but probably the first conversation that you have either with a potential employer or recruiting agency. AI is going to be great for the recruitment industry because you'll be able to go through so many more resumes and have a much more sophisticated way of matching resumes to job descriptions, resume history to job descriptions in the first stage of the recruitment process, right? It's like you get a BSA officer job, or I'm going to go into my applicant tracking system and I'm just going to try to find as many resumes that say BSA all over it. AI is going to do that in a matter of seconds instead of humans doing it over the course of 8 hours a week, right? That's going to be huge. And then the process will get more and more refined and much more efficient and successful. I see in the short term AI tools having a really strong impact, especially for the recruiting space, and eventually the candidates that are looking, is not only matching skill sets, but matching career trajectory, which is a lot more nuanced and sophisticated. So you have someone that is more of a career consultant that's jumping from one project to the next project to the next project, and then they start interviewing. They realize, I want a full-time job. I want one client instead of many clients. A human most likely would say, I'm not going to call this person because my client wants someone that has shown longevity. A career consultant has every right to become a BSA officer or a chief compliance officer like anybody else, right? I actually believe eventually AI would be able to say, okay, this person can be a BSA officer because they did this at X bank and then they spent a little longer at Y bank and then they worked at a Fintech, and the job that they're applying to is the deputy BSA officer at MasterCard, right, which is TradFi and payments and Fintech combined. And I think a lot of human recruiters, whether they have 20 years of experience or 2 days of experience, are going to be like, I'm only looking for someone coming out of Visa. And then on top of that, which I think would be great from a talent management perspective, I think AI would be a lot better, or at least less biased, hopefully, when it comes to helping people figure out their career trajectory. Because not everyone wants to be a BSA officer. Not everyone wants to manage a team of 50, but they want the same salary while doing really important work for their employer, while being an IC, individual contributor. And I think it's very hard for humans to think outside of these two boxes. You're a contractor, or you're trying to get to the top of the org chart, right? I think AI is going to be super beneficial when it comes to that. And then I think from a super practical perspective, AI could also be really good at, this might sound creepy, but if it's a virtual meeting, being able to read patterns in speech, patterns in facial expressions, almost like reading personality fit, which it can go either way. It could either be super biased or not. But I've interviewed a bunch of people who I just loved because we clicked. And then next thing I know, I realized they're not good for this job. They're a very lovely person, but not the right person for this role for reasons that were hard to figure out during the interview process. So I think AI is going to make the process more scientific, right?
Got it. We're coming to the end here. As we're closing, what advice would you give somebody who's a compliance professional who is on the job market right now? And you can use this as an opportunity to promote your organization.
I would give this advice to anyone that is looking, especially right now. You can come to Madison Davis. You can go to other agencies. I would create a relationship or relationships with 1, 2, or 3 recruiting agencies or recruiters that you trust. I actually tell people that I've had 20-year relationships with, don't just come to me because I might be working on a job with X bank and Y bank is using another agency. Now, recruiters are a dime a dozen, so the part is difficult, finding your 2 or 3 go-to recruiters. That'll take some time, but recruiters are free. If any recruiter charges you money directly, run for the hills. Have your professional advisors out there that are keeping their eyes and ears open for you, even if you have a job right now. Because the best time to look for your next opportunity, especially one that is better than you have right now, is when you already have a job. That's how it works. If you're on the market looking for a job because you are unemployed, definitely tap into a recruiter who has inside information, inside relationships. LinkedIn's great, but you have no idea where your resume is going. You really don't know who's on the other end. And especially if you do have a job, always tap in or always connect with the recruiters that you trust who are in your space and ask what's going on. Because you always want to be in the front of their mind. Because they might call you and say, hey, I got this job. It's one level below you, but do you know anybody? And you might be able to help a friend too. So these relationships are vital. So that's one piece of advice I would give to someone right now. Find your trusted advisors.
Fantastic. And we'll leave it at that. Sanjeev, really want to thank you for your time, for coming on the podcast. I hope that our listeners, especially those who are in the job market, found this valuable. We really appreciate you, and I'm sure the folks listening appreciate everything you're doing for the community.
Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate you inviting me. I had a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you.